Evening and welcome, everyone. I'm Dana Cunningham. I am so proud to be the Dean of Tisch College of Civic Life here at Tufts University. It's my privilege to welcome you virtually to the Tisch College and to this Susan and Alan Solomont Distinguished Lecture Series event with Sonia Raman, Tufts alumna and assistant coach of the N.B.A.'s Memphis Grizzlies. This is a night of firsts for us. This is our first Solomont Lecture Speaker Series event of the academic year, and my first overall as the Dean. And I know we have students who are joining us tonight during their first semester at Tufts, so a special welcome to you. I invite you all to return throughout the semester for a terrific lineup of events. We will be welcoming a diverse group of civic speakers, including United States Senator Tammy Duckworth, former Governor John Kasich, author Isabel Wilkerson, Somerville Mayor Joe Curtatone, and many more. Follow us on social media and check out our website for more information. Tonight, we kick off the Solomont series by welcoming fellow Jumbo Sonia Raman. In her leadership role as an assistant coach of the N.B.A.'s Memphis Grizzlies, she is the first woman N.B.A. assistant coach of Indian origin. Looking over her impressive bio, I see that Sonia and I have many things in common, but in particular, we spent time at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where Sonia previously served as the head of the women's basketball coach, as the head women's basketball coach for 12 seasons. She remains the coach with the most wins in the program's history, leading the M.I.T engineers to the program's first 2 conference championships in 2018 and 2019. Sonia played basketball while a student here at Tufts and later returned to the campus as assistant coach of the women's basketball team. Prior to her coaching career, Sonia, a Boston College Law School graduate, worked for the Federal Department of Labor and for an investment firm in the Risk and Compliance Division. In her own civic life, Sonia was previously selected to serve on the Coaches Council for the Alliance of Women Coaches, an organization dedicated to the field of women coaches at all levels, providing support, resources, events, and programs to address the needs and interests of its members. Joining Sonia in conversation tonight is our own Associate Dean for Programs and Administration, Diane Ryan. At Tisch College, Diane oversees a portfolio of programs and curricula that serve the entire undergraduate and graduate student body and provide resources for faculty research and professional development. Diane's teaching and research is focused on leadership development. She holds a secondary appointment as associate professor in the Elliott Pearson Department of Child Study and Human Development, and she is a co-investigator on a 5-year longitudinal study of character and leadership development at the United States Military Academy. Prior to joining Tufts, Diane was an academy professor, director of the Eisenhower Leader Development Program with Columbia University, and deputy department head in the Department of Behavioral Sciences and Leadership at the United States Military Academy at West Point. During her 29-year career as U.S. Army officer, Diane served in a variety of command and staff assignments, both stateside and abroad. During her last combat assignment with the 1st Cavalry Division in Baghdad, Iraq, she founded a U.S.-Iraqi partnership for military women and worked with several NGOs on peace and security initiatives. Diane is a noted expert in leader development and mentoring and has some basketball credentials of her own, I hear. Before I hand things off to Diane, let me acknowledge the tremendous support of Susan and Alan Solomont, their generosity, leadership, and support of Tisch College and Tufts makes events like this one possible. And thank you as well to our co-sponsors for this event, the Office of Alumni Engagement, and of course, Tufts Athletics. Thank you for your collaboration and go Jumbos. Thank you all for being with us, and please join me in welcoming Diane Ryan and our own special guest, Sonia Raman.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Dana, for that wonderful welcome. I'll echo what the thoughts of many Tisch College staff and faculty and students. We're delighted to have you as the dean, and I'm thrilled to be able to kick off the speaker series with a talk with a subject that's near and dear to my heart, and with a Tufts alumna, Sonia. So welcome, Sonia. We're so excited to have this conversation with you today, just in time for the season to start.
Thank you so much, Diane. And Dana, thank you so much for that introduction as well. I'm so excited to be a part of this, and just thanks to Tufts and Tufts Athletics for having me tonight.
So I always say, you have arrived when your college or university invites you to come back and speak, like that you have some credentials. And so I'm excited to kick this off and talk about sort of this very circuitous path. We had a former dean that had a lot of different careers before he came to Tisch College, and you've sort of had this similar, where you graduated from Tufts with a degree in international relations. You went to law school at BC, and then you worked for the federal government in the labor department. Then you went to an investment firm and worked in risk and compliance, all while doing basketball on the side. And then you finally ended up in a full-time coaching gig. So the question is, like, have you settled on what it is you're going to be when you grow up? Did you always know along the way that coaching was the thing that was calling you?
Yeah, I think that some of the fun of it all is not always knowing, and so for me, I was always on this path to coaching, but I didn't know I was on it. And I really enjoyed the other paths I was on as well. My career after law school, and before law school. Before law school, I did AmeriCorps, and I got to experience teaching and working in a school system. After law school, like you said, the Department of Labor, and then over at Fidelity Investments. But my time coaching at Tufts right after I graduated was really influential for me. And then my time coaching at Wellesley College as well after that. But if you look back on my path, you might think, if you'd taken away the other part of the path, of course, she was on this path to coaching. Even in high school, I coached my high school team before I even got to college. In a summer league, I coached in a clinic. It was like fifth grade boys were my team. So the very first time I ever coached, I actually was coaching boys. So my passion was always there. I loved it. And along the way, while I was at Wellesley, I realized that this is really what I wanted to do. And at M.I.T, the position involved NCAA compliance combined with basketball. So it just felt like such a great fit at a place that I really believed in. And so that's kind of how I ended up there. But no, I certainly didn't, and this wasn't the end game for me at all. It was always just kind of do my best where I am and enjoy it and find the joy always, every day, and try to get better. And then, one thing led to the next.
Yeah. So one of my favorite quotes is, you have to let go of the life you plan to find the life that's waiting for you. And it sounds like you followed your bliss. And that each one of those steps along the way helped to inform and maybe make you more successful in whatever that next role was. So that's great. So that sort of leads into the question about, the focus in sport, about big personalities, big plays, big wins. What would you say your personal strengths are that made coaching appeal to you in that kind of an environment?
Yeah, I would say, before I even mention, what I think my strengths are, it probably wouldn't be, I don't think I have a big personality. I don't think that has ever been me as a coach. And so I think one thing to kind of take from that is that there's a lot of different types of coaches. And, not every coach looks like the coach you see in a movie, and the way they're portrayed in that, dramatic, halftime speech that they give. You know, it can look really different. And so I think my strengths as a coach, a collaborator, and a teacher, I really tried to teach my players, my student athletes, as much as I could about the game, and really work with my coaching staff and our players and collaborate. Sometimes, you know, they might see something that we don't, or, you know, have an idea. And so, you know, I think that combined with being a problem solver, I really enjoy that aspect of basketball. You know, if you fail, you figure it out, you try again, and you keep going with it and having that growth mindset. So I think that, and, you know, just building relationships, it doesn't really work if you don't do that. And I think that's something that I really enjoyed along the way, both with the players that I've been able to coach and, you know, the coaching staffs that I've been a part of, just building those relationships, and continuing those relationships long after those seasons have ended. I think those are probably the things that have drawn me to coaching. There's certainly things that you can do even in other professions, but for me, it was coaching.
That's great. I would love to sort of not go back to the very beginning, but certainly think about your time at Tufts. And our students know there's many different opportunities, lots of unique experiences. You know, people have these different pathways, and yours is just as unique as any of those. You came to Tufts as a pre-med student, you switched to IR, you walked on to the basketball team, which I think is, you know, gutsy and perhaps unusual in some ways, certainly in this day and age. So what was that experience of being a student athlete like at the time, and how has that informed or influenced any part of your life today?
You know, Tufts was and is such a big part of my life. I think in many ways I really grew up at Tufts, and I developed so much. You know, as a student, of course, you're learning constantly. You're learning in the classroom, but, you know, just as a person, as a teammate, as a leader, I failed a lot you know, in different, and, you know, we lost a lot of games. I was one of the captains during a losing streak, and so of course I was like, how can I lead better? What can I do differently? I had 3 coaches in 4 years. So, you know, in the moment, sometimes you're like, oh, I wish I had continuity, but looking back, that was really great for my growth and development. You're constantly having to shift and adjust. You're learning new styles. And I formed lifelong friendships when I was there. You know, my teammates, my friends outside of basketball, and there was a little bit of a mesh there between those groups. And I think I was really able to, you know, find those lifelong friends. And, you know, even through COVID, we were still on Zooms together, you know, checking in on each other. And so I think, you know, I feel really connected to them and, you know, to the basketball program. I've been going back for years, watching their games, cheering them on when I can, and following them really closely, and just watching the tremendous success that they've had over the years. So it was a big part of my experience. And, you know, part of my time on campus, I think I've mentioned this before, you know, with Tufts, but I was in a car accident when I was there. You know, I got hit by a car over on Boston Ave. And for students who are regulars to that little intersection by Boston Ave and College Ave, there's a lot of lights, there's a lot of signage. That's probably because of me. So I missed a year of basketball because of that. I missed the second half of my junior year, going into the first half of my senior year. And I was really fortunate that my coaches allowed me to just be a sponge and, you know, stand right next to them, see what they were doing, learn from the sidelines, learn how to lead when you're not on the court. So many of those experiences, but I think Tufts just gives you opportunities to find your space, to learn, to grow. And because I was a Division III student athlete, I had a balance. You know, I was able to be engaged in campus life and to be involved in other things as well. So it, as you can tell, it was a really great time for me.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear about the car accident, and but I am grateful that there are lights there now, because that is a little bit crazy. Like you don't know which way you're supposed to be looking. So
a lot of silver linings there, because I learned a ton from that.
Right.
It
Yeah,
really launched me into coaching.
That's so important to find those lessons in adversity. And I think a lot of people who have enormous success will attest to the lessons that you've just communicated to us. So let's talk about the M.B.A, because, you know, that was an exciting and perhaps unexpected development for you. So you're the 14th female coach and the first female coach of Indian descent. So I am certain that there are probably some barriers or surprises in entering this space. So what advice would you have for any women that are perhaps interested in a career in professional sports? Like maybe what surprised you the most? What's, you know, something you
I mean, I think that
I
think the first barrier that's the most obvious that everybody kind of sees is that initial question of, can women coach men? You know, will the men listen to a female coach? Can they do it? Because there's not very many women coaching men, I think it might feel like a risk for people who are in that hiring position. And, you know, we certainly don't ask that same question when we're looking at maybe a man coaching a women's team. We don't say, you know, can he coach women? We just ask if he can coach. And so I think I was really fortunate with the Grizzlies. That's all they did with me. You know, in the interview, there was never a slant towards asking questions that may have led to trying to determine if I could work with men, if I could coach men. It was just, you know, can I build relationships? Do I have a good knowledge of the game? You know, am I, you know, an unselfish team player? You know, just strengths, weaknesses, you know, your standard run-of-the-mill interview. And I was actually really pleasantly surprised and relieved that that's how it went, because I think I was expecting much more of that. I think the other hurdle that sometimes happens is, you know, I didn't play basketball past my time in college at Tufts. So I wasn't a WNBA star. And then you see the women who have been coaching in the NBA and in the league, you know, most of them have been really good basketball players. And so that was a hurdle for me as well, you know, because it's a different path now to get in as a longtime coach, as opposed to a really high level elite basketball player. That's another thing that you see on the men's side. You see men who have played at a high level. You see men who've never played, you know, even at the college level, and we allow those different types of resumes. We allow the different types of qualifications. We recognize that there's so many different strengths that people can bring in all different avenues. And so, you know, starting to see that happen on the women's side, I think is important. And then your network is different. So, you know, if you're coaching women's basketball or women's sport, your network tends to be other women's basketball coaches, other coaches of women's sports, potentially other women. You know, the way hiring works, you know, we have this opening. Do you know of anybody? Oh, I know this, you know, this guy from such and such a place, or someone else. They may not know as many women's basketball coaches. So shifting to, you know, the advice piece, right? The first thing I would say is expand your network. You know, get out of our bubbles. Don't have that kind of insular network where maybe it's just coaches in your athletics department or in your conference, but, you know, try to get out of that. And, you know, one of the things that I did, even though it wasn't my goal to coach in professional sports, my goal was just to learn. So I went to watch other teams practice. I tried to reach out to other coaches, and it wasn't just basketball coaches. It wasn't just women's basketball teams. You know, I was a regular at Celtics practices and the roundtables that they hosted and WNBA practices, and, you know, spent a lot of time watching the M.I.T men's basketball team while I was there and picking the brain of their coaching staff. So expand your network. But I think the biggest thing is really know you belong and go for it. You know, don't wait for someone to invite you to apply, you know, or, you know, to the proverbial dance. Just go and go for it. Know you belong and believe in yourself. Say yes to opportunities. I think that's really important, and work hard and know that, you know, professional sports, it's nights, it's weekends, it's holidays. But to me, it's, you know, it's basketball. It's something that I love. So it doesn't really feel like a job. And so you should be ready to be able to put in that time, because that's really important, and it goes far, certainly in terms of trying to break in.
What has the role of mentorship, and to, on that vein, sponsors and champions, like who were your mentors, who sponsored you into the league, who championed you, and what kind of effect did that have? And similarly, is there anyone that you're mentoring now that you are pretty sure is gonna exceed you?
Yeah, I hope they all do. I'm glad you brought that up, the mentoring piece. And, when I say expand your network, that puts so much of the onus on that person who has a smaller network. I think it's really important for people, once they're in advanced positions, to help expand other people's network, and to reach beyond their network and pull more people in, to mentor, which I have done both, within my department when I was at M.I.T and externally. My mentors, the coaches I worked for when I was an assistant coach, learned a ton from them, both at Tufts and at Wellesley. And, my athletic directors and assistant athletic directors, the people that I worked with, within that department, at M.I.T, I think were really influential for me in my growth, my development. And, sponsors, like who vouched for me, with the Grizzlies. I mean, that's a big one, because someone might say, oh, I know so-and-so, but who's going to be your sponsor? Who's going to really, really vouch for you? So I'll mention Rich Cho, our VP of basketball operations here. And this goes back to my advice on say yes to things. Rich reached out to me when I was coaching at M.I.T a couple of years ago. And, he asked me if I had any potential, interns or recent grads that might be a good fit. They were looking to expand, whether it was coaching or video or analytics. And I thought it was just a brilliant place to tap into, right? Like you're tapping into these people who could come in and do analytics, but also really know basketball. So I said, I didn't have anyone at that moment, but I felt like I was going to very soon, knowing, people that were going to graduate and where they were going to be. So I said, let's keep in touch and let me be helpful if I can. And that's what I did. And so he was coming to Boston with his daughter to check out a volleyball game. And I showed him around campus. I spent some time with him. I introduced him to some professors at M.I.T who, run the sports tech lab and basically run a class on sports analytics and other sports topics. And so, I spent a good amount of time there, and that was really kind of where that relationship took off. And then, a few months go by and they have an opening, and he reaches out to ask me if I want to interview. And that's really why I'm here, is that connection. Otherwise, it's not like anyone from the Grizzlies would have known to get in touch. And when I talked to him about it, it's interesting because he said he actually reached out to a lot of people in the basketball world, because he really was trying to be intentional about expanding and diversifying and providing more opportunities for women as well. And he didn't get a ton of responses. So that was, as soon as I heard that, I was like, that needs to be one of the first things I say to people when I am mentoring and providing advice is respond, say yes, be available, and make those connections authentic. If you're doing it to be able to get something out of it, it's not the same thing. I've tried to continue to mentor, former assistant coaches that are moving on, and one of which is actually at Tufts. She was my assistant at M.I.T and she's there at Tufts now. So it's really exciting to see her grow. And another one of my assistants is the head coach at M.I.T now. So, I think those are probably, and certainly anyone who comes into the Grizzlies that's more of a rookie than I am, I'm happy to roll up my sleeves and do the same thing with them.
Yep. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity.
Absolutely.
So you touched on this a little bit in the previous response, but I just want to talk about women coaches for a minute. So a 2019 report from the Institute for Diversity and Ethics in Sports indicated that only 40% of head coaching positions in women's sports are held by women, as opposed to 90% in 1972. Now, to be fair, there were probably less teams then, but how do we balance not wanting to reinforce the antiquated, like boys coach boys and girls coach girls mentality with that reality and the fact that because of the history and trajectory of sports, most of the more experienced coaches with lots of accolades will be men?
So great question. And back to the statistic that you mentioned. So we'll take it back to 1972. There were 90% of women's teams coached by women. Now we're at 40.8%, you mentioned. You can look right at Title IX and when it was enacted, and that's when everything changed. So programs are now fully funded on the women's side, federally required. And so now these are great opportunities. These are great job opportunities for coaches. And, men saw that and obviously positions are very competitive if you're just limited to coaching on the men's side. So there's no reason to now, to not look at both and double your opportunities as men to be able to coach men and women, because now it's just as lucrative to coach on the women's side. And it makes perfect sense, for them to do that. And so that kind of level things a little bit on the, women's basketball side, where now it's actually a little bit less than 50-50, and where it's swung to more men. I think that we need to focus on providing more opportunities for women to coach, period, in the similar manner to what the men have, the opportunities that the men have. So, women should be able to coach men and women, boys and girls, whatever level that they're qualified for. So having those opportunities and expanding that, I think is really important. And I think that starts with, the hiring pools. That starts at the grassroots level, at those like assistant coaching levels, or if there's even a position before assistant coaching, whether it's basketball operations or video coordinator, let's find more opportunities for women to coach at those levels so that they can rise through the ranks and be, have those opportunities. But also you can certainly coach on the women's side and then move over and coach men. It actually really surprises me that there aren't more women coaching on the men's side at the college level. And I think that the opportunities are there. I think they're open to it. I think that, when I mentioned earlier, expand your networks, but I think that people who are in hiring positions need to expand their networks as well. So athletics directors, head coaches, when there's an opening, people have a short list. Do you have any women on your short list? And are you thinking about that? Because if you don't provide those opportunities, then a head coaching position becomes open and, it's a tough jump to go right to that. I think that's really where I've kind of always been intrigued. And, even when my goal wasn't to coach men, I wanted that opportunity to be there for anyone who did have that goal.
So I'm really curious, do you think you bring something different to the Grizzlies? Do you think that like their coaching has somehow been enhanced by having more diversity amongst the coaching staff?
I hope so. I'm very new to the position. I haven't even been here for a whole year. So, year one, a lot of it was learning everything, learning the system, learning the terminology, getting to know the people in a masked COVID, socially distanced environment. But I think that it's proven, I think, there's been plenty of business studies that diversity leads to more success. And I think that inevitably when you bring in that diversity, and for my contribution, it might not even be because I'm a woman, it might just be because I came from the college level or a Division III environment where you really have to maximize your talent and, do more with less when it comes to resources. Sometimes just a perspective like that can really be beneficial. Coming from M.I.T, I had student athletes that were, very bought into analytics. And so we use that a lot. And so that's part of my coaching style. And I think I bring that to the organization. But I think diversity of thought is so important. And we have that in our coaching staff. It's certainly not just from me. We have just people we have international coaches, men, women, people from all different kind of types of programs and playing backgrounds and not. So yeah, I think that can only really help and benefit.
Great. So you mentioned COVID. So I'd love to talk a little bit about what it's like coaching in that environment. So in your role as part of this coaching staff, are there any philosophy, is there anything in your philosophy or any lessons learned that you could impart to our Tufts community that we can use in this time of distance and disconnection?
Well, I hope that's temporary, and that we come out of this sooner rather than later. I think we're already making progress, of course. I also hope that distance doesn't automatically equal disconnection. I think that we've learned a lot, and as we return more to in-person activities, in-person education, in-person sports, there's certainly lessons that we can learn from the distance. I think that we can engage so many more people when we enter into a virtual environment. I think that we've already explored that a little bit in education with some different programs that most of the colleges have taken part in pre-COVID. But I think that higher ed institutions had to get much better at it very quickly without any notice, and I think that for the most part they did. I think that you can engage your alumni, all over the world when you have events that are virtual. They can't always fly in for a reunion or an alumni game or that one date that works for everybody. So I think, in colleges, I've really enjoyed being able to be a part of alumni, virtual Zooms with the basketball players and with my fellow alums at Tufts. I think that's been great. When I was at M.I.T. at the height of sort of this distance, we certainly did a lot of Zooms like everybody else. But I think the key was, in terms of maintaining a good culture, is that the communication has to continue. The authentic communication, it can't just be in a group, it has to be one-on-one. It has to be more intentional. You can't just count on walking into the locker room to change and seeing your teammate there and having that passing conversation. You have to find ways to do it. And that it's not one size fits all. So, I don't think there's one way to do it. And I think that collaborating and finding out what works in each space. At one point I was asking my players, how many Zooms are too many Zooms? How are you guys feeling? Are you Zoomed out? Are you not? What's a good time to do this? Are breakout groups better or not? So I think just realizing that it's not always going to work. Back to the drawing board, keep trying, keep collaborating, and be really intentional about connecting with other people. And, I know that we're in a very electronic age, and connecting for many people means texting or whatever occupies that space. But I think the Zooms and the phone calls can really go a long way.
Well, connecting and being intentional is a good lead up to my next question. So last week in the news, several members of your team, the Grizzlies, assembled teacher kits and thank you notes as part of their Grizz Goes Back to School campaign. Many sports organizations make philanthropy and community engagement a cornerstone of their corporate social responsibility efforts. Why is it important that teams, particularly in professional sports where there's, lots of money and those kinds of interests, to have a presence in the communities they play for? And how do you see the team's role as active citizens in Memphis?
Well, piggybacking off of that last question on distance and disconnection, I really missed out last year on all of the amazing things that the Grizzlies do in their community in person. And I kept hearing about it from the other coaches. And so doing that event that you just described last week was such a great experience for me. It was, my first one here with the Grizzlies, and just the energy level that everybody had. It certainly wasn't something that was required. I think that you see that people are coming really engaged and really understanding what they have an opportunity to do in this community. Memphis, the Grizzlies are really embraced here. And I think that's remarkable considering it's a relatively young franchise in Memphis. It's only been around for about 20 years here. And I think that is because of how much the team and the organization invests in the community. And, you can invest in a community or you can invest, on a community. You can always write checks. But I think that being part of the community, investing your time is so important. And I think that's something that I was really excited to see our players doing, the coaching staff, our leadership, our general manager, our head coach, everybody's rolling up their sleeves and doing these events that, as far as I know, actually happen very frequently, COVID permitting. So, professional athletes, coaches, an organization like this, we recognize we have a platform and there's resources. And so along with serving our community, there's opportunities to shed light on, inequities, injustices, and really partner with your community to have a meaningful impact. And that's going to look different in every community. So what works best in Memphis might not be the same, in Medford and Boston. But I think it's incredibly important. And I think that that connection to the community, it certainly goes both ways. And I think that the Grizzlies have embraced Memphis, and it comes right back.
I was going to say, would you say those things are symbiotic between the things that they do off the court and how they play? So I have personal experience with this where, the team was just focused on basketball, doing their thing. And then we expanded and did like a very deliberate community service plan that was sort of long-term and formed some longer-term relationships. And then they started winning all this stuff. Now, I can't say that's causal or correlational, but I'm just curious in your experience, like how do those things beyond just like, oh, we did good things and we feel good about ourselves, like, does that translate into performance on the court and like, I guess, building team cohesion?
I think it does. I think that it just overall speaks to having an unselfish organization and having a culture where everybody is trying to build each other up or, be mission driven and not have it be about yourself, to really get outside of yourself and be giving, whether it's on the court, whether it's an assist or, in your community. I think that if you're that type of team where you spend time together doing projects like this, understanding the impact of it, just practicing kindness and empathy and understanding what, gaining some perspective on what's happening around you. You're having those moments together. That's a form of team building. Team building doesn't have to be, it doesn't always have to be a team dinner or some sort of activity. It can be this, and it can take the form of serving your community. And I agree with you. It's certainly anecdotal, but I think that, when I see teams doing those types of things together, and I think enjoying it, you do see the translation that those teams tend to be teams that are really cohesive on the court as well.
So I want to sort of stay on this, but slightly alter it and talk about activism. And I really think, not just with activism, but I was inspired by the N.B.A's approach and leadership, like throughout COVID and how they handled things, I thought, in a very responsible way. And then the way they handled some of the things that you describe as more activist, right? Like the way that they responded to racial justice kinds of things. So I'm just interested in sort of your take on that from your bird's eye view. What things particularly stuck out to you, and what do you wish like others would learn from that? Because, professional athletes kind of sometimes don't always get the credit they deserve for those kinds of things. Like I get very annoyed with the shut up and play sort of mentality, because they are role models and they are exemplars.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that it's a very different era right now in basketball and in pro athletes than it was, 20 years ago, when, athletes were sort of instructed to, as part of building their brand was to be really careful and to tread lightly and really meaningful earnings could go out the window if they said something wrong. And so I actually really, and I understand why it was that way in that era, because that was a very real concern. I'm really pleased to see this evolution of where we are now with the N.B.A, the Players Association, really leading the way. There's so many great leaders, in the N.B.A, whether it's the Grizzlies or and beyond, that are finding ways to find their voice and I don't think that players get enough credit because, they do take risks when they go out there, when they take a stand, when they're being, activists, and they're doing this. It's just coming from such an amazing place and this desire to really, affect change. And I think that it's certainly to be commended. I don't think it should be an automatic expectation. And I think that when it happens, it is really remarkable. And I don't want to, I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention the WNBA. And, I think the work that the N.B.A and the WNBA both did in their respective bubbles during COVID, I think that COVID and those bubble environments also provided a unique opportunity for kind of the whole league to be in one place at the same time. So rather than, you play this one away game and there's two teams in the same town and that's it, you have the whole team and, the whole league. And I think that was a big turning point because leaders of different teams could get together and collaborate and come up with kind of league-wide solutions, in the Players Association, in the N.B.A and in the WNBA. So I look forward to seeing that continue and to supporting those efforts, with our players and with the league in general.
Great, thank you. All right, the time has come for us to get some questions from students. So the first person I want to invite up is Erin.
Hi, Sonia.
Hi,
My question is, what knowledge and experiences have you gathered from first playing, then coaching at the Division III level, now coaching in an N.B.A and professional level that you now utilize in your everyday life?
Great question. First of all, thanks for the question. And, just wanted to say, huge fan of you and your team. And I'm very, very excited to catch that first game, that first webcast when it gets out there. I think that pretty much everything I am as a coach came from my time as a Division III athlete and as a Division III coach. So everything I do bring to the Grizzlies comes from that. I mentioned it earlier, but I think that understanding that there's very limited resources at the Division III level, and that includes time. I think time being the biggest one. And you as a student athlete understand that. You have a very regimented amount of time. You have, 4 or 5 classes. You might be working, you might have an internship, you have other activities, and you're trying to fit basketball in there, which is, your passion and something that you want to give everything to and have this amazing 4-year experience. So, limited time in the day and limited years of eligibility overall. You only get 4 seasons. So as a coach, figuring out how to be as efficient as I can, and what are the most important things every day? And what are the most important things in terms of preparing us for a season? You can't be good at everything. If you try to be good at everything, you're going to be, average at best at everything, if not worse. So pick the things that are most important and be efficient. Be efficient in each practice. Practices for us at M.I.T. were from 5 to 7 o'clock, and we didn't start before 5 and we didn't end past 7 because they were off to the next thing. And so that's challenging as a coach. Sometimes you want to do a perfection drill, and as players, you may not get there, and you want to do the drill again and again and again, and you can't. So I learned very quickly, don't do that drill at the end of practice, right? But to be really respectful and efficient with time for my coaching staff and the student athletes was actually, it turned into a really good skill, because at any level that becomes important. What I thought was going to be professional sports was just endless amounts of time. They're professional athletes all they do is play basketball all day. That's all they have to think about. You know, they don't have to go to classes, et cetera. That's obviously far from the case. So, you know, at this level, there's 82 games in a regular season. You have very limited practice time. You need time for recovery as well, because you're constantly reloading and playing another game. So, you know, just trying to, those lessons actually have become very valuable here, where sometimes I find myself saying less is more. You know, you can't do everything. Maybe we could do a 3-hour practice, but it might not be the best thing. And I would say that's probably one of the biggest things I've brought into it. And then just, I think I mentioned it before too, just being a collaborator and working together, just that team environment that I think is really special. Coaching Division III student athletes who are not on a scholarship, you know, you just kind of, you want to make sure that you're bringing value to them every day. And so every day when I plan to practice, I would think like, is it efficient, but also, is it fun? Are they going to enjoy this? Are they going to, you know, is this going to be like one of the best parts of their day? And fun to me sometimes is working really hard in a drill and getting it right. You know, that's part of basketball. That's fun too. But I would say those are probably the things that I've taken with me the most.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have Sophia. And Sophia, if you would tell us your class year and where you're from.
Hi, Sonia. Nice seeing you. I'm a senior. I'm from Sudbury, Massachusetts, and I'm on the women's basketball team as well. I was wondering, like, what does your day-to-day look like? And on your side of things, what does preparing for a Grizzlies game look like?
Great question, Sophia. And good luck this season, if I forget to say that at the end. So day to day, you know, in season and preparing, I'll just kind of start with preparing for a game. So there's a few teams that I'm in charge of scouting. Obviously, it's a team effort. So we have video coordinator that I'm paired up with, and, you know, we work together. And then we kind of meet as a staff to sort of hash out the whole game plan. But leading up to it, I'm watching a ton of film, you know, clip after clip after clip of offenses, their sets, their player tendencies, their what they do defensively, what they might do in an end game situation, just trying to be as prepared as I can for anything that might happen. But then again, less is more. So as the scout coach, I'm going to probably have the most information in my head about this one team. Now, how do I whittle this down to the most important things for our staff meeting? And so that's kind of what that game day looks like, is staff meeting in the morning. We go through the scouting report that, you know, I put together, which is pretty extensive for us. We do like a 5 or 6 page scouting report. That doesn't go to the players, don't worry. So that's just for the coaching staff. And then we go through it, you know, item by item, and then kind of collaborate, come together. Head coach makes the final call on like what the game plan will be. And then we go to shoot around, and whoever the scout coach is presents the scout to the team. So, you know, I'll be kind of going through the film with the team that I put together, you know, just explaining it, talking about the matchups, the individual players, getting them where they need to be to walk through plays, and, you know, helping out during the shoot around with that. And then same thing with pregame. Right before the game, they come into the locker room. We watch another edit that the scout coach puts together, and that coach is leading that part. So again, just kind of reminding everybody of what they're doing. So as an assistant coach, you actually get a lot of responsibility when it comes to game prep. And with that, you certainly want to make sure that you really know your stuff. So being new to the league last year, I probably watched more clips than the average because I wanted to make sure that I just sort of built up that mental Rolodex of, all right, you know, this is the Boston Celtics. This is what they like to do in these situations. This is what they do. This is something they might typically do right after, you know, a timeout, and just understanding like what's their DNA. And so that was really important to me, and probably the thing that I felt like leaving a place where I knew, you know, I knew the teams in New England really well. So now coming into a league where I had to really gain that knowledge. So that's what a game day looks like if it's my scout. Otherwise, day to day, there's player development. So you're assigned players that you work with. You have time on the court with them, you know, basically just one-on-one. Sometimes there might be combined players, but that player development that you're working with them, and then there's practice, and then maybe a little bit more on the court with development, or it's a game day. So it's so day to day, it's pretty similar to that. It's a lot of film, it's a lot of time on the court working with the athletes, and then kind of just helping out in drills whenever and wherever.
Awesome. Thanks, Sonia.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, we have Dylan.
Hi, Sonia. I'm a junior on the basketball team here at Tufts. I have a lot of respect for, the Grizzlies as a small market team, and what Taylor Jenkins is doing. I'm a fan of his, but just wondering, what's your favorite part about working in the NBA, with the Grizzlies? And have you had any welcome to the NBA moments of like, wow, I really, really made it?
Okay, so favorite parts of working in the NBA. So I love the problem-solving nature of basketball, and like the preparation that goes into a practice, into a game plan. So I just love that the season's longer and that there's more games. 82 games, way more practices. You get to start earlier. In Division III, as you know, we as coaches can't work with the players on the court. So being able to work with them year round, I think, to sum it up, I think favorite would be just more. I get more of all the things that I really love to do. And N.B.A. moment, it's incredible. These are the best players in the world, and just getting to see them communicate on the court up close. I've certainly watched a ton of NBA games, and I've watched them from a little bit higher up. Unique year with COVID. There were most of the gyms were very quiet. So you can hear the communication between players on the court, and I think that watching that type of leadership happening on the court, just the level that players have in terms of the knowledge of the X's and O's, but also the scout, the game plan. As a coach, someone might call something out, and then, LeBron James he immediately knows what to do, and he knows exactly how to attack it. And there he goes. So, so that was kind of a really fun welcome to the NBA moment for me, was just seeing that up close.
Thank you.
And good luck in your season as well. I'll definitely be following, and good luck to you and your new coach as well.
Thank you, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a question in the chat from Jay Lynn, who is a high school athlete looking at Tufts. And their question is, how did you get around Tufts after your accident? How much support did you get with your work while you were injured? It's important to know how schools could support injured athletes. And I know this is interesting as a D3 school. So what advice do you have for Jay Lynn?
I would say I had tremendous amount of support. It was like, sorry, there's a little fly there. It was 1994, I think. So certainly I'm sure that the resources that Tufts have, I've seen the facilities and all the upgrades, it's incredible, but I had a lot of support when I was there. Especially just my teammates, my roommates. It was just, at first I was on crutches, so I just needed someone to carry my tray around in the dining hall or in Carmichael. And, the athletic trainers were providing all of the support I needed in terms of rehab. And that's a really great thing when you're an athlete in college, is you don't have to leave campus to do physical therapy. You get to have someone right there dedicated and helping you through all of it. My coaches were really, I think, just provided emotional support. Sometimes you just kind of have a feel sorry for yourself day, right? Like I know I had mentioned, got through adversity and I learned so much and I learned resilience, but part of it is you just have some of those days where it's a little bit tougher. And I had an assistant coach that was really great at picking me up or giving me a little tough love if I needed it. But physically, how I got around, I crutched around as much as I could. And there's certainly like shuttles available at Tufts to help you move around if you need it. So I was always there if I wanted to do it. I was a little stubborn and didn't always take advantage.
I also spent a few months on crutches at a school with a big hill. So I have a lot of empathy. Those were hard days, particularly in the winter. All right, so we're almost at the end of our time, and we've talked about basketball a lot, and I could keep going because I could talk about basketball like for infinity. But I want to end and ask you. I want to compliment you on your 12 seasons at MIT and for being the winningest coach in your program's history. So we've well established your credentials as a basketball coach. But what we would like to ask you as the last question is, what would you say is your biggest win not related to basketball?
Biggest win not related to basketball. I would say that I'm really fortunate to have, the best support system around me that I could have. So I don't know if it's a win or just that I'm really lucky that I have that. But my partner Milena, my parents, my brother, and friends that are really a chosen family. I mean, at this point, as you get older, those friends are, they become like family to you. And so I don't think that I could do any of this without that. And I think that, pursuing a very non-traditional career and having that family support and having, coaching friends to talk to about, a losing streak or having, how do you solve this problem? And just the love and support that I have, I think is what I'm happiest for.
Well, that's wonderful. We're thrilled for you. And we are delighted that we got to spend this time with you tonight before your season starts. We certainly wish you the best for this upcoming season. Hope to see you on the parquet at some point this winter. And it's just been a pleasure talking to you. And it's always great to have a jumbo come home.
Well, always a jumbo. And thanks so much, Diane. And thanks to everybody for having me.
Thank you.